Off camera?
Yes.
Okay.
State-sanctioned murder is not justice. It is a terrifying reality that President Biden must address now.
Christopher Villalba was my son, and he was the 7th executed on the Trump execution spree.
We must move with urgency and ensure that history never repeats itself. We all watched with horror as the first Trump administration went on an unprecedented execution spree, executing 13 people in a matter of months.
Penalty. Bring it forth.
That was more federal executions than the 70 years we'll see.
For many people, the death penalty is a debate about policy, law, and deterrence. But for me, it's deeply personal.
It took 28 minutes for my son to die. I learned that my mother and my loved ones were gunned down by a white supremacist trying to start a race war. He's not an innocent man on death row, but he's a man that has humanity, that I have been willing and worked hard to give forgiveness to. I do not want him to die. To spend the rest of his life in prison, yes, but not for him to die in the name of my family. We are urging you, President Biden. I hope you hear my words. I hope you get to hear the pain in my voice.
You can call the White House, and that's what we're asking people to do, is call the White House 11 to 3 p.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
I need each and every one of you to call the White House to let President Biden know that executions are not what the majority of Americans want. People will die under Trump, and we're trying to stop that. Be a part of this movement. Help us stop the death penalty.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Abe Bonowitz. I am the Executive Director of Death Penalty Action, and we are gathering to respond to President Biden's commutation of 37 of the 40 people on federal death row. I want to welcome especially all the members of the media. Share with the folks that are in our audience that if you're not members of the media, please defer to members of the media when it comes time for questions. We're going to hear brief statements from a selection of folks, including people directly impacted by this issue, and then we'll be taking questions. So with that, I want to begin as the Executive Director of Death Penalty Action, which was started, our organization, in 2017, when Donald Trump was being inaugurated. We looked around and realized that there needed to be an organization that would focus on making sure there are protest opportunities for anybody who wanted to show up or do something to say it's wrong to be executing people. We didn't see what we felt was needed, so we created Death Penalty Action. Very soon it became evident that our work was needed at the state level as well. But when it came time for those federal executions, we were there. We helped create the Terre Haute Death Penalty Resistance Network, and we were outside the prison and sometimes at Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C., which at that time was as close as you could get to the front of the White House, at every one of those 13 executions. And we don't want to go back. We don't want to have to do it again. And that is why for 4 years we've been running a campaign asking President Biden to commute all of these death sentences, federal and military death sentences. And we're very grateful for what he did. But we need to finish the job. And every person left on the federal and military death rows is being handed over to Donald Trump for execution. Death Penalty Action opposes the death penalty in all cases because it is a failed public policy any way you look at it. The danger of leaving the death penalty as an available tool for Donald Trump to use cannot be overstated. Donald Trump idolizes dictators and relishes dictator-like power. We are absolutely grateful for what President Biden has done, but we urge him to finish the job. Do not give Trump the power to execute anyone. So here's the thing. The Unabomber died in obscurity last year. It was a blip in the news. Most people, even in our movement, have no idea that he's dead. These three racists and terrorists who have been left on death row came to their crimes from political motivations. When Donald Trump gets to execute them, what will really be happening is that they will be given a global platform for their agenda of hatred. Joe Biden can prevent that. Joe Biden has a month left to fix this and finish the job. And in doing so, he will sentence them to death by incarceration, which is actually a far harsher punishment, especially when you consider how young two of these men were at the time of their crimes. I think life without parole is a misnomer. It's death by incarceration. And life in maximum security is no picnic. You want to order a pizza? Forget it. Walk barefoot on grass? Nope. Make love to your partner? Nope. You get Bubba. Or rather, Bubba gets you. Seriously, President Biden, finish the job. Clear the federal death row. Clear the military death row. There's 5 people on the military death row. Resentence those people to death by incarceration and let them die in obscurity rather than on a pulpit where they get to trumpet their message and create copycat followers. With that, I want to turn this over to Reverend Sharon Risher, the chair of the board of Death Penalty Action.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hold on. There we go. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. There are conflicting feelings here for me today. And I thought that I was going to be able to get through this. And I will get through this. But see, people tend to forget the human side of this. Lord knows I'm happy. Hallelujah, I'm happy. I'm joyful for those sentences that have been commuted. And without the push to President Biden, there is mercy for 37 others. But see, this is still unfair because if you're going to commute 37 and not 40, now you're playing judge, President Biden. And I need you to understand that when you put a killer on death row, the families are left to be hostages for the years and years of appeal that will continue to come. Every time this comes up, like now, I've got to stay away from the news today. I got to turn the TV off because whose face am I going to see until this passes by to the next news cycle? But with every breath in my body, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to be executed to the roof. But you need to understand these tears are not for you. These tears are for everybody. These tears is for the horrendous thing you did that will not ever be forgotten. So President Biden, I'm begging you with everything that I have, to let the other three that's left have that same grace and mercy that you gave the 37 others. And those 5 people on the military death row, God have mercy on them too. We still got time, President Biden. I need you to look me in my eyes and hold my hands when I tell you why. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and the Lord is my strength, and I will not faint. Thank you. If there are any
Amen. Thank you,
questions,
Reverend Risher. I do
okay.
want to note, of course, permission is granted for the media or whoever to record, and this is on our YouTube and Facebook and X, and of course, we can send a link of the Zoom video when it's done as well. Next, I would like to welcome and introduce Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood, who has been a death row minister across the country, for a brief statement. Reverend Hood.
Well, first of all, I love Sharon Risher. That's the first thing. I'm thankful for the courage that you continue to show. You show up day in and day out, living out your faith as a witness and testimony to all of us, to the nation. You know, I think that I too am conflicted, but I think more than conflicted. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm somewhat disgusted. I feel like we have a president that promised to lead the way, promised to push for the abolition of the death penalty. And here we are in the last hours of his presidency. And I feel like we've been tricked. I feel like we've been told that the worst of the worst is still eligible for execution. We're still going to promote that, which I believe sets our movement back years. Because I think what we're talking about is a situation in which the president of the United States has said, okay, it's now acceptable to execute the worst of the worst. And so now every state is going to have the opportunity to define, once again, their worst of the worst and feel comfortable continuing executions. I hope that Joe Biden lives out what he said he was going to do. And that is do everything he can to stop the death penalty, to abolish the death penalty. No more promises, no more hopes, no more dreams, action. Finish the job, Joe Biden. Finish the job.
Thank you, Reverend Hood. Cantor Zusman, if you can turn your camera sideways or vertical again. This is Cantor Mike Zusman, with my co-founder with myself of L'Chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty. Cantor Zusman?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to honor and lift up the words of Reverend Sharon Risher, of Reverend Jeff Hood, with whom I agree for both of them wholeheartedly. On behalf of our thousands of members, there are no exceptions to state-sponsored murder. I've said it before, and we'll say it again. We hold the torch of Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor, who said death should never be the answer in a civilized society. No matter whom Biden and the American government choose to afflict this punishment upon, they will still be carrying on the Nazi legacy that is lethal injection, which is most likely the form to be used. They are keeping the door open for this abomination. I'm reminded very much of decades ago when Adolf Eichmann was on trial. And Martin Buber and Jewish theologians across the world said this is a great mistake. Why? Why is it a mistake? Shouldn't it be that the worst of the worst get the worst penalty. The reason is because philosophers and abolitionists from the Jewish tradition and from across the world know that you are keeping the door open to Pandora's box. You let in any crack and people will run with it. We saw it with Trump last administration. By keeping this door open, this is indeed a pro-death sentence, and we cannot stand by it. May all the killings end without exception. L'chaim, to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Cantor Zusman. Please welcome now Shane Claiborne with Red Letter Christians.
Good to be with all of you. This is a time to celebrate because likely we have just seen many lives spared. But it's also a time to grieve because we still see the affirmation of this myth of redemptive violence, that killing is a solution to killing. And so we got to organize. But it's a time to celebrate that over 400 organizations stood up and called for this, thousands and thousands of people. Change doesn't just happen. Change is made. History is made. I'm a Christian, and sometimes people wrongly say all we can do is pray. And I believe in prayer, but I also believe in good organizing. And one of my mentors said that good things come to those who wait upon the Lord sometimes, and good things also come to those who get organized and make change happen. So thank you for showing up. But this is not a time to pause and stop. It's a time to keep turning up the volume. And we've still got work to do to abolish the death penalty. So today I just want to say, alongside my friends and colleagues, that every move away from the death penalty is a move in the right direction. And so we celebrate Biden's decision to commute the 37 sentences, but we still have work to do. 37 is good, but 40 is better. And every single death sentence taken away to say we will not continue to kill, to show that killing is wrong, is exactly where we need to go. And as a Christian, I want to say, as we approach Christmas, the birth of the Prince of Peace, that you cannot worship Jesus. Joe Biden is Catholic. Many people who support the death penalty are Christians. We cannot celebrate the one who blessed the merciful and still support the death penalty. At the very heart of the gospel of Jesus is that no one is beyond redemption, even someone like Dylan Roof. And I want to say my sister Sharon Risher has been a light in this country, using her wounds to heal the wounds of violence. For her, this is not just about who Dylan Roof is, it is who we are. We refuse to allow those who have killed to make us killers, those who have hated to make us hate. So rather than asking, don't they deserve to die? We need to be asking, do we deserve to kill? For it was Jesus that said, let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. So we bless the merciful. And I thank God that there was mercy shown today, but the death penalty does not heal the wounds of violence. It just creates new wounds. It mirrors the evil that we want to rid the world of. So it is time to abolish it once and for all. So I'm so proud to join this movement with so many friends. And we still got work to do, y'all. So thank you, Joe Biden, but we need to do more. And you still have time to say, I want to stand for life without any exception. There is no exception to God's mercy, and we should never play the role of God in taking another person's life.
Thank you, Shane. Now allow me to introduce Charles Keith, who is the Impacted Communities Liaison for Death Penalty Action, to share briefly, and then we'll be hearing from several people who are directly impacted with loved ones on death row.
You know, Abe, I'm sitting here listening to Shane, Jeff, Reverend Hood, Sharon Risher, and I'm in awe, to be even in the company of the three of these people. I've learned so much by sitting back, listening, following and stuff. And I'd have to say that throughout this endeavor, I've learned to forgive. There's a lot of things I will not forget, but I did learn to forgive because I carried a lot of burden in my heart for what had happened to my brother. So when I got around, excuse me. So when I got around these people, I call them champions of my heart because they taught me how to live, they taught me how to forgive, and they taught me how to move on. They taught me how to be effective in the movement. So I feel like I'm a link in that chain. I know you hear my voice is shaky, but for those 37 guys to be commuted, and I know this is personal because I did not like Dylan Roof. And listening to Sharon, she allowed me to forgive him and so many other people. But for him to not finish the job, it's incomplete. It's like he never heard a word she said. Because in commuting all, I know she wanted Dylan Roof to actually be commuted. But in order to get him commuted, let's give everybody a chance to be commuted. So yeah, you did an incomplete job, and I think you missed the target. You missed the bullseye. Joe Biden, I think you missed the bullseye. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And now allow me to introduce Lisa Brown, who is the mother of Christopher Villalba, who was executed in September of 2020 as part of the first Trump execution spree. Lisa, welcome.
I can't even begin to express everything that I'm feeling right now. Sharon, you were the first one on my mind when I heard this, because I know for you, your pain continues. And I just want to say, from this side of the issue, the family members of those 3 men that are still there and the 5 on the military death row, their pain continues, because every time I can remember the 20 years that Christopher was on death row, that every time something happened in his case, it just opened the wounds all over again. And I know that's what's happening to Sharon and the others that did not achieve what they were wanting in this today. However, I do applaud the president for doing what he did do, but like the others have said, the job's not done. And myself as a veteran, I have never understood how someone that has served this country could ever be sentenced to death. That should always mitigate the death penalty, in my opinion. So for those 5 people, I pray that he rethinks this, relooks at it, and does not look at it with a bias. Again, like was said earlier, he's making himself judge, and they're redefining the worst of the worst. I can remember the first time that I visited my son on death row. Timothy McVeigh had just been given his execution date, and he received a 30-day reprieve at that time, or a stay. And I can remember thinking they're going to deny my visit because it was such a media circus. But the thing that stuck in my mind was not that God compelled me to write to Timothy, and I had been told that he had never sought clergy of any type during his time on death row. And I told him, you need to make it right between you and God. And he thanked my son for me writing to him. But the thing that stuck in my mind was that he told those men, when my son went to death row, there were only 21 people on death row. When my son died, there were 62. So it tripled in the 20 years that he was there. And Timothy told them, as long as I am alive, basically he was saying he's the poster child for federal death row. And he said, you guys do not have a chance as long as I am still alive. Well, praise God, that at least a portion of that has been shown to be false. But I don't think that there are others out there that realize that there are other people that fit that quote unquote terrorist definition that are still are going to be commuted. So I don't understand why the original three that bombed the Trade Center, the one that shot up Fort Hood here, right where I live, they're being commuted. So why are these three being singled out? Would be my question.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa Brown. And again, we'll all be available for questions. I think we reached out to Yvette Allen, the sister of Billy Allen, and we didn't hear back. But I would encourage people to reach out to her. And also with us today in our last, I think it's our last speaker until we take questions. And I would invite the media, if you have questions for a particular person, you can put that in the chat or use the Q&A function. But first I want to introduce Bethany George, who is the daughter of Alfred Bourgeois, and he was one of the people executed. He was executed on December 11th, the night before Brandon Bernard was executed, and there was a ton of exposure and concern and public outrage because of that case. And then the next night, Alfred Bourgeois was executed, and there was very few people outside the prison, and nobody was talking about it. And it wasn't until a month later that I learned that he actually had a credible innocence claim. And we want to put a link to his webpage in the chat here, and we want to ask people to look at that because also concurrent with this campaign, we have added a request for President Biden to grant a pardon to Alfred Bourgeois and to take a look carefully at that case, a posthumous pardon. So Bethany, are you able to join us?
I am. Can you hear me, Abe?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm here today because the media made you believe that my father was a monster. And there was something on this call that Reverend Hood mentioned when he said, what about the worst of the worst? And if you read what the media states, they made my father out to be the worst of the worst. But what happens when it's just simply not true? Like, my father was not a monster, and my father would never hurt his children. He was a hard-working truck driver, and he actually became a truck driver so we could see the world. That was his wish. He would have given his life to protect us. And as long as I've been in my father's care, as long as I've seen him with every one of his children, he has never, not so much as lifted a finger. So to know that this innocent man suffered for 28 minutes from a botched execution haunts me. It haunts me every day of my life. I try to find peace, but it almost feels like it doesn't exist. And many people don't know, but the whole time that my father was in prison for 18 and a half years, we were not even allowed to speak to him. We were not allowed to hear his voice. We were not allowed to get emails or calls. That whole time, it haunts me to think that he was just alone. And it was not until the day of his execution that we were able to hear his voice. And the last thing that he asked me to do, even in death, is to clear his name and the horrible slander that has been imposed upon it. My father, again, would never harm his children. A corrupt trial and prosecutorial misconduct caused my father to be executed, even though there was undeniable evidence of his innocence. Undeniable that several individuals were willing to speak about. And not only was I kept from speaking and even testifying, even viewing what happened during the trial, but medical experts who were willing to say there was no abuse, there was no rape, there was no blunt force trauma, all of these horrible accusations that were made against him. The evidence was available since 2004. And the prosecutors did nothing. They allowed an innocent man to die, and they allowed all of that evidence to be kept from the jury. While I am grateful to President Biden's decision, I'm grateful for his decision to commute most of the federal death sentences. I must stress that this is not enough for families like mine. My father was innocent, and his execution represents a devastating miscarriage and failure of our justice system. A posthumous, and it shouldn't be posthumous, he should have never suffered the way that he did, but a posthumous pardon is necessary. It's necessary for my father to acknowledge his innocence, to restore his name, and to restore his dignity. And most importantly, to inspire reform to a system that is so desperately needed. And to, most of all, to make sure that this, what I'm living, this nightmare that I've been forced to live, does not happen to your family. There has to be accountability, and there has to be acknowledgement for the innocent lives that have been wrongfully convicted and executed by our federal government. Justice, again, although I'm so grateful, and this is a step in the right direction, justice isn't fully complete until my father's name is cleared and until his dignity is restored. And in the future, we have to put systems in place so this does not happen to people who don't deserve this fate. It's not fair. And my father deserves justice along with so many others. So I'm asking you, President Biden, please give my father what he deserves, what he rightfully deserves, because he has suffered enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is the webpage for Alfred Bourgeois, and you can take a look at it. The link is in the chat. So we're just grateful that you're able to be with us. I also want to share, also this link is in the chat, the information about the military death penalty, since so few people have been talking about this in this campaign. But we're looking at 5 defendants currently on death row, 3 of whom still have appeals, but 2 are ready to have their execution dates set. And we know what's coming if Joe Biden doesn't take these people off of death row. Finally, this is the front page of the webpage at deathpenaltyaction.org, where we're calling people to action. We're continuing to gather organizational sign-ons to our letter. We're now approaching 450 organizations that have signed the letter for organizations. And we've also changed up the petition that we have been presenting every so often, and we'll be doing another presentation of that on January 8th. Along hopefully in collaboration with all the other organizations that are also working on this with petitions. And the call is to finish the job. And of course, this is where you can find the video with Reverend Risher and Ayanna Presley and Lisa Brown and others. So that's what we've got. And now we're ready to take questions. So if there's any media that would like to ask questions, you can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand, and I can give you a open you up to speak. Hearing none, I want to invite. We'll give it another minute, a few seconds, but we'll take us out again with another playing of our video that we made from our activities in Washington, D.C. on December 10th. So, Trish, if you're ready to share that, one last call for questions. And then, we're going to, I know there are people that want to do one-on-ones. I've told Reverend Risher that she gets to take Christmas and to be with her family. And we all want to take the holiday, but we will be as responsive as we can to people who need more comments and that sort of thing. So with that, Trish, if you don't mind, share that video. And thank you all for joining us, and we wish you all the best this holiday season.
State-sanctioned murder is not justice. It is a terrifying reality that President Biden must address now.
Christopher Villalba was my son, and he was the 7th executed on the Trump execution spree.
We must move with urgency and ensure that history never repeats itself. We all watched with horror as the first Trump administration went on an unprecedented execution spree, executing 13 people in a matter of months.
Penalty. Bring it forth.
That was more federal executions than the 70 years before.
For many people, the death penalty is a debate about policy, law, and deterrence. But for me, it's deeply personal.
It took 28 minutes for my son to die. I learned that my mother and my loved ones were gunned down by a white supremacist trying to start a race war. He's not an innocent man on death row, but he's a man that has humanity, that I have been willing and worked hard to give forgiveness to. I do not want him to die. To spend the rest of his life in prison, yes, but not for him to die in the name of my family. We are urging you, President Biden. I hope you hear my words. I hope you get to hear the pain in my voice.
You can call the White House, and that's what we're asking people to do, is call the White House 11 to 3 p.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
I need each and every one of you to call the White House to let President Biden know that executions are not what the majority of Americans want. People will die under Trump, and we're trying to stop that. Be a part of this movement. Help us stop the death penalty.
Let's make it a better day. Finish the job, Joe Biden.